Chapter 39. Alice replayed the vision again and again as she flew into the house and up the stairs. "Oh," I breathed, standing up. "Oh." Each time the movement in Bella's face sang through me as her eyes flew open, her crimson pupils a shock and a miracle at the same time. Alice appeared in the doorway. She placed her hands on either side of the doorframe.
"Everything is becoming more defined," she said excitedly. "The moment is coming."
"Do you see anything beyond that?" I asked hopefully. She shook her head.
"No, just the one vision with the mirror. In fact, I can't see any of us after Bella wakes up."
She walked over and touched Bella's face, fondness shining in her eyes.
"Once she wakes up, it's all up to Bella, and I know she'll amaze us."
Then she looked up at me, her eyes dancing, and I knew she had figured something else out. "What, Alice?" I asked anxiously. Her eyes moved off mine and towards the window behind me. She walked over silently, looking up, placing her palm against the glass.
"Cloudy today," she said softly, "and I see rain tomorrow."
She whirled around, and her face was on fire with delight.
"And I don't see rain in any of those visions. It's today, Edward. I think she will wake sometime today. By the look of the light coming through the window, I would say this afternoon."
"Oh, God, Alice!" My voice was choked. "Do you think so? That would only be 2 days." She nodded.
"I do."
"Wait," I said, looking around wildly. "The clock, Alice." I pointed to the clock on the wall. "The clock." She glanced up and then closed her eyes, trying to gain a perspective on the clock. The outline of it was on the wall, but the hands were too blurry to distinguish. She sighed and then shrugged her shoulders, opening her eyes.
"Either way, it's today, Edward," she said, smiling. "I feel it."
She ran over and gave me a quick hug.
"I'm going to go tell the others."
"Alice," I said, "I want to talk to Jasper about... Do you think the mind reader can hear us yet?" I paused, confused, trying to place the unfamiliar thoughts that had just moved into range. Alice watched me carefully. "Who knows? Hey, hello out there. We come in peace. Yo, Edward." Quill and Embry, I realized suddenly, coming to talk to Jacob. I put my hand on Alice's arm. "Alice, let everyone know the time frame. And could you ask Jacob to come up and see me?" Alice raised her eyebrows in surprise, but nodded and disappeared swiftly out the door. I searched the wolves' minds, trying to see if there was anything wrong that precipitated their visit, but it seemed to just be a friendly visit, although I could see in Quill's mind images of Sam telling Billy Black the situation with Jacob, Renesmee, and the treaty. Billy's eyes were wide, his face pure shock. At his shoulder stood Sue Clearwater, her eyes intent on Billy, looking at him with an expression I had seen many times on her daughter's face, fierce and protective. I realized that Jacob truly needed to go home in the near future and speak to his father himself. I expected, however, that this was not advice he would appreciate getting from me. "Incoming," thought Embry. "Seth or Leah?" Quill wondered. Seth came into view within the trees. "Oh, thank God," thought Embry. There was a soft knock at the door. I moved swiftly over, opened the door as little as possible, and slid out into the hall to speak to Jacob, leaving the door just slightly ajar behind me. His expression was strained, still expecting me to snap and kill him, I mused. I put him out of his misery quickly. "Quill and Embry are heading in to see you. They're just past the property line. Just a friendly visit, nothing wrong. Seth met up with them a couple of minutes ago." "Oh," Jacob said, his voice filtered with surprise. "Great, thanks." His eyes flickered momentarily to the door behind me, and then he turned to leave. "Jacob, wait," I said, reaching out to touch his arm. I don't know if you heard Alice before, but it appears that Bella will be waking up later today." Jacob's eyes widened with more surprise. "That's great." His smile was weak, and his eyes looked warily at the door behind me again. "Listen, Jacob, when she wakes up, you might want to clear out of here for a while. She's going to wake up thirsty. Warn Seth and Leah, too." Surprise filtered across Jacob's face. "But I don't want to leave," he said quickly. "I thought my kind wasn't a temptation." I smiled wryly. "Well, yes, generally your stench reduces your appeal, but you've seen how wild and impulsive a newborn can be. You have a heartbeat and blood, and that will be enough to put you in danger." Jacob stared at me for a long moment, and then his eyes narrowed. "But, Renesmee," he asked, and I could feel his protective instincts flaring, and irritation clawed at me. "What about Renesmee?" I asked in a low voice. He gaped at me. "Well, if you're worried about me being near Bella, how can you possibly let her be near Renesmee?" "That's none of your concern, Jacob," I said coolly. I was well aware how carefully the situation with Bella and Renesmee would have to be handled. I did not need him questioning me about my own daughter's safety. "We will keep her safe." "But she has a heartbeat and blood, like me, and I bet she smells a lot better to your kind than I do. How can you leave her in the same house with a bloodthirsty newborn?" he growled. "Because Bella is her mother," I snarled, my voice growing louder. "And it's none of your damn business, Jacob. This is exactly the kind of thing I worried about letting you stay here." "Everything about Nessie is my business," he shouted. Something inside me, something that had been suppressed, snapped. "She's my daughter," I yelled. My hand shot out, grabbing the front of his shirt. Emmett and Jasper appeared instantly on either side of him, steel in their faces. He tried to pull a step back, glancing quickly to either side, before resting his gaze on me, his hands up. "I won't fight you," Jacob whispered. "I won't." And I knew he wouldn't, for Renesmee. Carlyle appeared at my side, and he put his hand on my shoulder. "Edward," he said in a warning voice, "you're overreacting. He just wants to make sure she is safe, like the rest of us." I let go. "Do you honestly think I would put Renesmee in any danger?" I hissed. "Or put Bella in the position of hurting her own daughter?" Jacob shook his head, but I could see the doubts lingering in his mind. "I am responsible for their safety and welfare." Jacob nodded again, looking resigned. "I understand, Edward. I know." But I suspected he wasn't done worrying about this yet. He didn't want Bella near Renesmee until we were sure it was safe. I sighed with irritation. "Go downstairs, Jacob," I said quietly. He looked at me for a long moment, and then took another step back, as if to leave, before he paused, frowning. He looked uncomfortably around at Carlyle, Emmett, and Jasper. Edward," he said quietly, I'd really appreciate it if I could tell Bella myself. You know, about me and Renesmee." I glared at him. He had picked the wrong time to ask for a favor. He looked slightly panicked at my expression, and took a quick step towards me. "Please, Edward, I have to do this myself. Bella and I, we have a lot of history, and I just need a chance to let her know in my own way. Please." "Oh, say yes, Edward," Emmett thought. "It will be excellent fun watching him tell Bella. She's going to flip." I sighed, rolling my eyes internally. "All right, Jacob. If I can possibly avoid it, I will leave it to you to tell her. Although, I think it would be a lot safer for you if I let her know while you were miles away, where she can't kill you." He laughed nervously. "I'll take my chances."
"There's a pack of mutts on the front lawn,"
Rosalie called from the stairs. Embry, Quill, and Seth had arrived.
It's like we're living in a damn dog pound,
she thought irritably. Jacob smiled wider, turning and bounding down the stairs. I looked around at everyone. So you've heard about Bella this afternoon? Yeah, said Emmett, clapping his hands together. This is going to be a fun day. Jasper glared at him sideways. We should make some plans. I nodded. Carlyle squeezed my shoulder, smiling. It's wonderful news, Edward. I'm heading out to the clinic for more blood for Renesmee. I want to get there as soon as it opens, so I can return quickly. He looked at the room behind me. She is still unresponsive? I breathed out and then nodded again. He patted my shoulder. I'll be back shortly. He turned and hurried down the stairs, Emmett behind him. He kissed Esme lightly at the door and then left, heading for the garage. I looked back at Jasper and was surprised to see his expression intense. He was staring at the wall as if he could see into the office behind me. Something's changed, he whispered. I searched his mind. He had sensed a change in Bella. Damn. I whirled, flying back into the room. Bella was still unconscious. Jasper followed behind me, moving slowly until he was standing next to her. What do you feel, Jas? I asked quietly. His brow furrowed, and he shook his head slightly. The blanket has been lifted. I can feel something now. But... He breathed in and out slowly a couple of times, trying to tease out the emotion he felt emanating from her. I watched and waited as he struggled for several minutes. For Jasper, some emotions were easy to identify. Sadness, anger, happiness, panic, fear. Sometimes feelings were more vague, but if he knew the situation and was aware of the context, then they were more easily interpreted. But there were many other shades of the emotional spectrum that were not easily labeled. Jasper was very, very good at distinguishing the feelings around him, but sometimes even he was unable to fully understand, to articulate what he was sensing. Control, he said finally. I don't know how else to describe it. I feel like there should be pain or fear, but I can't access it. It's reined in too tightly. Whatever emotions are within her, they are overpowered by control. I frowned. That didn't seem to make much sense. Maybe he was misinterpreting, searching for answers where there were none. I bent very close, whispering quietly in her ear. Bella, love. I inhaled and then froze. The morphine. The scent was completely gone from her blood. I stood up slowly, my chest tightening like a vice. Why don't you go plan with the others, Jas? I said softly. I think I should stay alone with Bella as much as possible now. I didn't look at him, but I could sense his confusion. Keep the baby downstairs from now on, all right? Okay, Edward, he said. Whatever you want. He stood for another moment, watching me, and then left, closing the door softly behind him. I sat down slowly, placing my hand on Bella's arm. The morphine was out of her system, and still she didn't move. Why, oh why was she still unconscious? True fear, falsely kept at bay under the illusion that the morphine was keeping her still, now rose up, with full, overwhelming power. I felt paralyzed by doubt and confusion, and frustrated by the reality that there were no answers to be had, no recourse but to wait and hope. Never before had I wished more desperately to see into her mind. It occurred to me, in that moment, that perhaps I might soon be able to, when she became like us. In the back of my mind, I felt a small thrill of excitement at this thought. That would be a gift beyond measure. But for now, she remained close to me. I sat unmoving next to her as the minutes passed. Eventually Jacob, beaming with pride, brought Renesmee out onto the porch to meet Embry and Quill, and see Seth again, while my family milled nervously by the windows. Despite their size, The Quileutes were surprisingly gentle as they passed Renesmee around, each holding her in turn. Renesmee soaked up the attention, charming them with her smile and stunning them with her gift. Once Nessie was safely back inside, Jasper talked quietly with Emmett and Alice, who had never lived with a newborn vampire. He talked about keeping Bella calm, her mood steady, no sudden movements, and if she had to be dealt with physically, to not let her get her arms around your body. I could see in his mind that he planned to be near her at all times, to use his gift to help maintain her mood and reduce as much as possible the need for physical restraint. Eventually, I heard the car pull into the drive and then around to the garage. Carlyle was back. He came into the house, and he and Esme began to fill the refrigerator with blood. Renesmee stirred and began to make soft, whimpering noises as she neared wakening.
"Give her back to me,"
Rose snapped at Jacob, who was still holding her.
"She'll be hungry."
"I can feed her," Jacob responded, irritation lacing his voice.
"No, you can't." "Rose?"
Esme called from the kitchen, her voice slightly disapproving.
"Bring Jacob a bottle."
Rose gritted her teeth, standing up and stomping out to the kitchen.
"Fine," she thought, "but I'll take my damn time doing it."
I listened as Rose enacted her revenge, loitering around in the kitchen and taking her time getting the bottle ready, during which time Renesmee, now fully awake and hungry, bit Jacob. He was very good-natured about it, of course. There was really nothing in the world that could make him upset with Renesmee. Carlyle, who had finished filling the refrigerator, gave Rose an exasperated look, and then headed up the stairs to see Bella. He stood for a moment in the doorway, taking in my strained expression. "Everything okay, Edward? May I check her?" I nodded, and he moved silently into the room. He went over to Bella, pausing over her for a moment, listening, and then he pressed his finger gently to the inside of her wrist, checking her heart rate. 86, he thought. A little higher than yesterday. He glanced up at me. "Still no change?" "None," I whispered. Over 36 hours since I'd initiated the change, since I had punctured her heart with the syringe and pierced her skin in countless places, forcing my venom into her system, and she had still shown no sign of regaining consciousness. Carlyle bent down and inhaled near the inside of Bella's wrist. "Oh, there's no scent of morphine left." "I know," I said softly. Carlyle furrowed his brow. "What is attributing to her unconscious state?" He leaned down to her ear. "Bella, can you hear me?" He watched her carefully, eyes scouring her face for any sign of response. She retained her unearthly stillness, and I was helpless against the rising tide of my worst fears. "Something's wrong," thought Carlyle. I glanced up, and he met my eyes. Could she be awake and too scared to respond? Confused? That seems unlikely. If she had any level of consciousness, she would not be able to remain so still against the pain. But try talking to her, Edward. I wrapped my hand around her fingers. "Bella, Bella, love, can you open your eyes? Can you squeeze my hand?" I didn't get a response, and I didn't expect one. I couldn't believe that if Bella was awake, she would not have responded sooner. She would be writhing in agony if she were conscious. Something was wrong. It had to be. I pressed my face into my hand. Maybe, Carlyle, maybe it was too late. She had gone too long without a heartbeat. Venom could bring someone back from the brink of death, but could it not revive the dead? Was that what I had tried to do here, and failed? Listen to her heart, Edward. It is stronger than even Emmett's was. I've never heard anything so vital. She'll be perfect. Her wounds have completely healed. The venom is doing its job. I looked over her body, glimmering in blue silk on the table. Her skin strong, smooth, perfect, as Carlyle had said. But was it just an illusion, a perfection that masked something irreparably broken within? Were we blind to injuries that the venom had not been able to reach inside her body? And her spine? Her injuries weren't much worse than Esme's. The venom will heal her, as it did Esme. But Esme had thrashed and screamed, strong and vital within the burn of the venom, as soon as her physical injuries had healed. I remembered. I had helped to hold her down on the bed, preventing her from hurting herself, listening to Carlyle's words and thoughts as he agonized and apologized and worried if he had done the wrong thing. Carlyle could see these memories reflected in my eyes. "She's going to be okay, Edward." "But she's so still," I whispered, glancing away from him, back to Bella's face. I must have done something wrong. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Carlyle put a hand on my shoulder and squeezed. "Or something right, Edward. Son, you did everything you could have and more. I'm not sure I would have had the persistence, the faith it took to save her. Stop berating yourself. Bella is going to be fine. She's in there, somewhere, Edward. You haven't lost her. I know it's confusing, but for some reason she is unable or unwilling to respond. She'll emerge whole as soon as she's ready." Unwilling? Why would Bella be unwilling to respond, or unable? I tried to imagine Bella trapped in her body, racked with pain, unable to reach out for help or comfort. It made me physically ill. It was beyond nightmarish. "She must be in agony," I said, my voice rough. Carlyle sighed. "We don't know that. She had so much morphine in her system. We don't know the effect it will have on her experience." But the morphine was gone. I placed my other hand gently on her arm. "Bella, I love you," I whispered. "Dear God, if she was in there, anywhere, please let her know that one thing. Bella, I'm sorry." Downstairs, Rosalie had finally swept out of the kitchen, handing Jacob the bottle with one of her sweetest, most lethal smiles. Nessie had already bitten Jacob 2 more times.
"Here you go,"
she simpered. Jacob looked up at her with a grin, not giving an inch. "Thanks, Rosie," he said loudly, taking it from her hand. The others hid smiles as Rosalie crossed her arms, scowling.
"You're welcome, Fido,"
she growled, turning on her heel and stalking across the room and up the stairs.
"I'm going to take a shower and try to wash this stench off."
Emmett trailed behind her. Carlyle looked at me, raising his eyebrows. "They're at each other's throats down there. I think it's getting worse. Do you want to catch Rosalie in the hall?" "No, I'm staying right here," I said quietly. "They'll sort it out." "An interesting situation," said Carlyle. "A werewolf and a vampire, mortal enemies, fighting over who gets to feed the baby. And I thought I had seen just about everything." "I'll deal with it later. We'll deal with it." I pressed Bella's hand again. "I'm sure between the 5 of us, we can keep it from turning into bloodshed." I sighed. Jacob was going to have to learn to give Renesmee and us some space, especially after Bella woke up. But Rosalie was going to have to accept that Jacob would be a permanent fixture in Renesmee's life, and hence hers, and ease up on all the mental and verbal barbs, because I couldn't stand to listen to the 2 of them bicker for the next God knows how many years. "I don't know which side to take," I muttered. "I'd love to flog them both." That was actually an extremely agreeable idea. "Well, later." Carlyle glanced at Bella. "I wonder what Bella will think, whose side she'll take." I laughed lightly. I imagined her first inclination would probably be to kill Jacob, just as mine had been. Maybe not. "I'm sure she'll surprise me. She always does." Carlyle left with a smile. I glanced over to the half-read book, but I was too tense now to continue reading aloud. I simply sat and watched Bella, waiting. Alice ran out to the cottage again, wanting to put the finishing touches on Bella's, or technically our closet. Time ground to an excruciating halt, with the clock on the wall moving with a taunting slowness, each individual tick seeming to stretch out for several minutes. Rosalie and Emmett took Nessie for a walk in the woods, and Carlyle and Esme talked in slow murmurs in their bedroom for a while. Finally, mid-morning, I heard Alice returning from the cottage. She had the good sense to come straight up to see me. "How much longer?" I asked impatiently, as soon as she entered the room. Scanning her mind, I caught a glimpse of the gargantuan closet she had created in the cottage, before it was replaced with a vision of Bella. Bella's form was barely indistinguishable from one of ours, bright and sharp.
"It won't be long now,"
Alice said.
"See how clear she's becoming? I can see her so much better now. I can see her as I would see one of us,"
she thought happily, sighing, still relieved to be able to see Bella at all. Then her eyes tightened, thinking how she would never see Renesmee. "Still feeling a bit bitter?" I asked. I knew it literally drove her crazy not to be able to guard over Renesmee's future.
"Yes, thanks so much for bringing it up,"
she groaned.
"You would be mortified too, if you realized you were handcuffed by your own nature. I see vampires best because I am one. I see humans okay because I was one. But I can't see these odd half-breeds at all, because it's nothing I've experienced. Ugh!" She began to try desperately to look for Renesmee in the future, as if she could somehow prove wrong the theory she had just pronounced so loudly. "Focus, Alice," I said. I was afraid she'd only make her head ache again. "Right,"
she said, concentrating on Bella, but I suspected she would be trying to see Renesmee again later. I wondered if she would ever give up and accept the limitation. Probably not. The vision crystallized again. Bella, framed by Alice and me, her eyes fixed on the mirror. How desperately I wished I could see what she was going to do next.
"Bella's almost too easy to see now,"
Alice said happily. She flipped through the scenes of the day. Bella's eyes opening, and then Bella in the mirror. There was no mistaking the vitality of Bella in this vision, even without movement. Whatever happened, it was clear that Bella would wake. She would rise off the bed. She would stand next to me and gaze at her reflection. "She's really going to be fine," I breathed.
"Of course she is. When will you learn not to doubt me, silly?"
"You weren't so sanguine 2 days ago." I thought about the gouges Alice had put into her own face when she had feared Bella was dead and gone, when Bella's future had threatened to disappear from us all.
"I couldn't see right 2 days ago,"
she said softly. She cringed at the sudden memory of those awful seconds, Bella's future gone, and her heart silent. Alice's mind reflected back further, to the moment Bella had blurred right out of the future in her mind, in the moment when Bella had decided she wanted Renesmee. Together we watched the cascade of memories, the echoes of the blurred agony she had felt as she strained to see anything of Bella's future, obscured by Renesmee.
"That girl of yours was trying to be the death of me, but now that she's free of all the blind spots, it's a piece of cake."
"Could you concentrate for me, on the clock? Give me an estimate."
"So impatient. Fine, give me a sec."
She changed the perspective, trying to see the clock on the wall again. 2 faint dark lines appeared now, the hour and the second hand, still blurry, but they seemed to point to the right of 12 o'clock, maybe late afternoon, early evening. It was mid-morning now, not much longer. "Thank you, Alice," I said. Alice was admiring Bella's future reflection in the mirror.
"She's going to be dazzling."
"She always has been," I growled. Alice snorted and rolled her eyes.
"You know what I mean. Look at her."
I smiled. She was spectacular, and mine.
I'm counting on this vision coming true,
Alice thought.
Promise me I can be there the first time she sees her reflection.
I nodded, and Alice grinned at me, and then left with a silent breeze. She let my family know about the time frame, and a nervous anticipation swept the house. As time passed, most of them fell into a nervous stillness. Alice, Carlyle, and Esme stood near the back window, watching the light move through the clouds from the pale glow of the morning to the high sky of the afternoon. Emmett and Jasper stared blankly at reruns of college football games on the widescreen. Jacob and Rosalie were quiet as well, only an occasional argument over the baby. Even Renesmee seemed to sense the tension, dozing more than usual, and playing with various toys and objects Rosalie had provided when awake. I found myself unconsciously counting Bella's heartbeats. It was something I had done as I lay next to her in bed, my brain automatically collecting the beats that reverberated through my body while she slept next to me. At once it passed the time and confirmed she was safe and healthy. Now it was all I heard as a heavy veil of silence seemed to descend onto the house, and so we waited, unable to do anything more. 30,276 heartbeats after Alice had left the room, Bella's heart began to speed up. The shift in speed was swift and sudden, clearly discernible, each heartbeat steadily coming faster than the last. This was it.